Republican South Dakota Senator John Thune is the Senate Minority Whip. He joins us now. So on the president's trip to France, here's what Politico observed. Quote, as Biden begins a month of high-stakes international meetings with a trip to France this week, two bloody wars in Ukraine and Gaza have complicated the president's job, and polls show contributed to the shakiness of his political standing at home. And remember what former Obama and Bush 43 Defense Secretary Robert Gates wrote in his 2014 memoir when he said, I think Biden, has been wrong on nearly every major foreign policy and national security issue over the past 4 decades. So, Senator, how much of a liability is all of this going to be for Biden in November?
John, it started with the debacle, which was the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. It has continued into unfreezing, cash to give to the Iranians at the very time Iranians were planning their attack through Hamas on Israel. What's happening in Ukraine, many people would say that the president was slow on the uptake, wasn't, as they were requesting munitions and weaponry and that sort of thing, weren't getting it to them. So the list just gets longer and longer of this administration's failures on foreign policy. That's not going to be an issue that's going to serve the president well with the American people, because, as has been pointed out in the past, on all these major foreign policy decisions, the president has historically been wrong.
All right, so I'm not exactly sure how much confidence President Biden instills in world leaders, but according to President Biden, it's Trump that they fear. Here's what he told Time magazine in an interview, quote, there's not a major international meeting I attend that before it's over, and I've attended many, more than most presidents have in 3.5 years, that a world leader doesn't pull me aside as I'm leaving and say, he can't win. You can't let him win, speaking about Trump. Now, Trump was tough with world leaders. He held NATO to account, to be sure. Are world leaders right to be concerned about him becoming president for a second term?
I think world leaders want Biden because they know they can maneuver and manipulate and control Biden. President Trump was somebody who was feared on the world stage. And when you're dealing with a dangerous world, and that's what we have today, John, whether it's the Indo-Pacific, the Middle East, Ukraine, our southern border. There are lots of national security threats out there, and I think that most foreign leaders like to have Biden in office because they can maneuver around him, and they didn't have that luxury with Trump. Trump was tough. He created ambiguity with some of these leaders around the world, which I think served our national interest very, very well. So I think that's what's at stake in the election when it comes to national security.
I mentioned at the top here that some Democrats are splitting with the president over foreign policy. That is a reference to a bill that Republicans brought in the House to sanction the International Criminal Court for saying that it wants to bring charges against Benjamin Netanyahu. The White House said, no, don't vote for that, but 42 Democrats did.
Right, and the only charges the International Criminal Court ought to be bringing is against the leaders of Hamas. I mean, this is internationally speaking, a joke, what they're talking about doing. And I think that House Republicans, obviously, and with some Democrats, some discerning Democrats, made a strong statement. I hope that the Senate, that Leader Schumer will take that legislation up and give us a chance to vote on it. Because I think a clear message needs to be sent to people across the world, both adversaries and allies, that we stand with freedom and democracy, we stand with Israel, we stand against Hamas and Israel's attempts to try and eliminate them, the terrorist threat that represents, on their border every single day and destabilizes the Middle East on a daily basis. That's what the International Criminal Court ought to be focused on, not on Israel.
I wanted to ask you about the president's executive order on immigration. It was partly done under Section 212F of the Immigration and Nationality Act, which is ironic because that is the same subsection that President Trump used to enact his immigration ban back in early 2017. So Biden's treading the same ground that he has. He says he needs to do it now because the goodwill of the American people is wearing thin. But that raises the question. We just talked to Congressman Pat Ryan about that. Why didn't he do this a couple or 3 years ago?
Right. That wore thin a long time, American publics on this issue. And, honestly, everybody talks about the border crisis that's happened on Biden's watch. It didn't just happen. He orchestrated it. He reversed, some 90 Trump executive orders dealing with the border and has basically just started to wave people into the country. And this is an example now of him trying in a political season, realizing how underwater they are with this issue with the American people, to try and get right. But nobody is confused by it. It's too much, too little, too late. And honestly, all the executive orders right now that he puts in place don't matter because nobody believes they're actually going to be followed up on and enforced. That's the problem this president has. He has a credibility issue on the southern border. Almost 10 million people, 362 people on the terrorist watch list. Yep. And, just in the last year, 80 times the number of Chinese nationals that had come in the year before. Special interest aliens from places around the world, all of whom are suspect and questionable. They have figured out that there is a portal at our southern border that they can get into this country. And that is a huge national security threat, John. The president's finally responding to it only because he's under political pressure to do so.
And this new executive order, according to our Fox News calculations, would still allow nearly 2 million people to come into the country illegally every year, which is way above.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is not an improvement. And as I think Governor Abbott pointed out today, all this does is incentivize people to come in bigger numbers because they want to beat the deadline. But you're still talking about huge numbers. I mean, historic numbers. This is not progress in the overall fight to keep the operational control of the border or to keep Americans safe.
We'll see where it goes from here. Senator John Thune of the great state of South Dakota. Good to spend time with you, sir. Thank you.
You too. Thanks, John.